Welcome to Talk Back. Today we will be discussing the impact of the WTO on price and availability of new medicines. As you know, there has been a lot of apprehension about the new intellectual property rights regime under the WTO on the pricing and availability of new medicines in India. To discuss these issues, I have with me Dr. Anji Reddy, Chairman, Dr. Reddy's Lab. Welcome to the program, Dr. Reddy. There is a lot of concern about what the new intellectual property rights regime is going to do to the pricing of medicines. People recognize that there is need to invent new medicines, to make better medicines available, but because this regime says that the research and development will be protected through intellectual property protection, it's going to mean higher prices. So I would first like to get your overall comment on the new WTO systems.
First of all, I would like to tell you that the apprehensions are quite genuine because for years we have enjoyed this Indian Patent Act 1970, which does not recognize the product patents, and therefore Indian companies have been able to replicate all the best of the medicines in the world that were discovered at a very huge expenditure. But here, by just doing it through another process, we were able to bring it really, really affordable prices to the masses of India. And if you have allowed us to do that from 1970, obviously, if there is a feast, it cannot continue forever. So it's quite logical that after 35 years, in 2005, there will be a regime where we are supposed to have graduated in 35 years into the IPR regime. And if at all someone is not prepared for that, I think it is his or her mistake. And you have 35 years, and I don't think there is any genuine reason for not preparing for this regime.
In fact, Dr. Reddy, you have really been an icon in this respect because, as you said, when the Patent Act of 1970 came into India, you really copied a lot of molecules that were invented outside of India and made medicines available at very reasonable prices. And you have now, your company has graduated to a research and development based company where you are yourself in the game of inventing new molecules. How many companies like yours would there be in India today that have moved into a status where they have R&D base within the company?
There are, to my mind, about 10 companies. But let me tell you, I have started this quite ahead of many of my colleagues.
I know that.
In the year 1992, when I started this, actually we were enjoying this game, and we were making quite good profits. And I knew at that time that one day there will be a regime, and we must be prepared for that. So therefore, as president of Indian Pharmaceutical Congress in Bangalore, I have said that we better move to the IPR regime. And when people were saying that no, Indians cannot do it, actually I have shown a model what Japanese were doing, that you need not have to invest money from research till it goes into the market. Actually, with very little money, you can do the research up to preclinical, and then if you have value for your product, the discovery, someone else will take it and develop it further by investing huge amounts of money. And you will not only get the milestones or payments out of it, but you will get royalties if and when it becomes a drug.
But surely, if you have the research capability to discover a molecule, you should be able to go through the other stages of clinical trials and everything. In fact, one of the things that is mentioned about your company is that you have been licensing molecules that you discover instead of adding value to it yourself and bringing much more foreign exchange to our country.
Yes, actually what I did was I started the drug discovery in 1994. In 1997, I had a molecule ready for licensing. And that was the stage when I certainly was not in a position to do the clinical development on my own. So therefore, when Novo Nordisk approached me, I said, please do take this and pay me the upfront and milestones and the royalties. They have agreed for that. I have continued to do this till 2 months back, the preclinical research, and trying to license it out at the stage of proof of concept in animals. But now I have changed my own way of working, and therefore 2 months back, my fourth molecule I have started developing on my own. Now each and every molecule coming out of our laboratories will go up to the completion of phase 2A, which means proof of concept in humans. So I'm now graduating from proof of concept in animals to proof of concept in humans.
Dr. Reddy, I've also heard the complaint that whereas India should be a good competitive place to do clinical trials, actually government policy is putting some hurdles in the way because of animal experimentations which were possible earlier on, which are possible outside of India, are not being allowed in India today. Is this true?
Let us differentiate between animal experiments and the clinical. Clinical
Yes.
development is on human beings.
Yes.
And there are certain problems in the existing rules of the government, but it is being tackled now. And increasingly, many companies are conducting the trials. For example, Pfizer has conducted clinical trials successfully. They have filed the results in the form of dossier, including the Indian results also, to the US FDA. And a very famous company, number one CRO, clinical research organization by name Quintiles, has set up shop as early as 4 years back. And they are doing very good work.
So they bring their molecule discovery from outside
Yes.
and come and do the clinical
They
trials.
bring from outside, or they will license from India,
I
or
see.
Indians themselves can get the work done by the CROs, or Indians
see.
can set up their own clinical research, which my colleagues in Ranbaxy are already doing.
Yes. So that is the last stage. But in between is the stage of animal experimentation.
Yes.
Now, are there some problems there because of some new developments?
In animal experiments also, as far as the experiments up to rodents is concerned, rodents means mice and small animals, there are no problems. We have not encountered any problems. It is only when it goes to bigger animals like dogs, there were problems. Now there also, it's a question of toxicology, for example. Each and every company cannot have a toxicology laboratory. It is prudent to actually get it done from a standard toxicology center. We are actually getting it done in Switzerland. But we will be very happy if these constraints are removed, and if we are able to do it in India, we can do it at a lot cheaper. Otherwise, so much of foreign exchange is unnecessarily being wasted.
But are the Indian stipulations in this respect much more stringent than what is being asked for by other countries?
Absolutely.
They are.
And there's a lot of delay in giving the clearances.
Now you mentioned that there are about 10 companies with this R&D base, and you have this Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance, that is the association of these R&D based companies in India. And this I would describe as the globalized part of the industry, which is really looking at global markets and wanting to make a presence there. Do you feel that in any way you are handicapped compared to R&D based pharmaceutical companies elsewhere in the world?
Yes, actually, not only handicapped, we were, particularly my colleagues were overwhelmed, because that Glaxo has a $3 billion budget, Merck has a $2 billion budget. It is true, but having said that, an innovation, if it is a real good innovation, it finds its value. Whether you are a $1 billion spending company, or whether you are a 1 crore spending company, or whether you are a 10 crore spending company. in my opinion, if you are capable of spending 10 crores on drug discovery, you can arrive up to the stage of preclinical development.
So 10 crores is the threshold. If you invest that much money, the probability of your coming up with
Why
a good
I'm
discovery.
saying 10 crores is because you need, for example, a team of at least 15 very good organic chemists, and then 10 to 15 pharmacologists, and the infrastructure for carrying it out. That is why I'm throwing a figure of 10 crores per year.
One of the concerns that people have about this whole R&D aspect of pharma development is that all the companies, whether they are multinational corporations or our own R&D based companies, they will only invest in R&D in medicines for which there is demand. So the rich people's diseases will get more attention, whereas the tuberculosis, malaria, or the other common man's disease will not find as much investment in R&D. Now, what would be your reaction to this?
Let me first tell you that sometimes these are all apprehensions. Some people really believe that a poor man, a laborer, doesn't get heart attack or is not having cardiovascular risk. It is not true. On the other hand, we found during the testing that many research institutes in India that poor people do have risks associated with cardiovascular disease as much as the affluent people. Diabetes, for example, is as prevalent in poor people as in rich people. Therefore, it is not that it's not correct to say that this research is directed only for the affluent. That is number one. I would like to say this, but definitely, the multinational companies in the developed world will have no interest at all in addressing the diseases in the developing world. And having said that, there are instances where, for example, Merck did the work on river blindness in Africa, and not only they discovered a medicine which prevents river blindness, and it's because the African people cannot afford, some 20 years back, Merck declared that we will give this medicine free to the Africans or whoever requires in the world for as long as it is required. That was one of the fantastic moments for pharmaceutical industry, and it was acclaimed all over the world.
There are these occasional instances of goodwill or, gesture on the part of a company, but the point that is being made is that whether you are an Indian company with a global view or you are a multinational company with a view to the world, if there isn't a market, you wouldn't want to invest large amounts in R&D. So how can we encourage companies like yours to invest in R&D to fight TB and come up with new breakthroughs for malaria, etc.?
In fact, having arrived in the drug discovery, so far I have not considered whether it should be for the developed nations people or for the developing nations. But having settled down a little bit, now I started thinking about it. And it's not correct to say that there is no market. And believe me, if the drug research is conducted in this country very efficiently, from beginning to the market, it wouldn't cost a fortune, for example, to discover a new effective medicine for malaria. It doesn't cost a fortune. You don't have to throw about figures like $500 million. Probably I may do it in 50 crores. It's not correct to say that there is no market.
But how do you motivate companies like yours to do this?
It should come from within, for example. Now, I'm considering, for example, that if there is a good anti-malarial drug from my stable, if I create a 100 crores market for that, and in the new patent regime, nobody else will be allowed to produce here. And even if I put it at an affordable price, we will make very good profits. This industry, unfortunately, today is we have to answer to the investors. We have to tell them why we are investing. And I believe personally that by investing in the diseases like malaria and tuberculosis, definitely you can make profit compared to the investments you are making major investments in this country.
Now you have Dr. Reddy's lab has listed on New York Stock Exchange recently. So I can see that you, as you say, you have to work for your shareholder, and yet you are in an area where there is moral pressure and human pressure on you to price your products in an affordable manner. And the industry in India, particularly the R&D based industry, is very agitated about price controls. What is your view on price controls on medicines in a country like ours?
We are not against price control, but the fact is that when they left it to us to fight, we don't need the government to bring down the prices. We did it on our own. All these modern medicines, starting from enalapril onwards to amlodipine and all that, what is the prices at which we are selling now? It is not one company. There are 20 companies fighting for the same generic drug. And we don't need the government to bring down the prices, but we don't want regulation. Regulation sometimes becomes strangulation. And that is what we are saying. Now that the new policy, hopefully, will be based on competition rather than regulation. If they allow us to price based on competition, then there should be no problem.
But Dr. Reddy, as you know, worldwide today, there is so much controversy on the pricing of medicines. Take the case of AIDS medicines. Now here is a clear example where you had a patented medicine which was really being sold at $15,000 a year or whatever it was. And then it was because of the pressure from civil society that, the price of this drug was lowered.
Yes.
And most recently, as you know, Dr. Hamid of Cipla has called the bluff of these multinationals and said that at least today I can supply it at $1 a day. On the one hand, this is a very good thing from a consumer's point of view. On the other hand, it does mean that the R&D based industry, when they get threatened that they cannot recover their costs of what they have invented, and this will discourage your investment in. So what is your assessment of the AIDS controversy?
First of all, let me come to the $1 per day. Yesterday I read in newspapers that there is a Hyderabad-based company which says we have now got a better process and we will offer it $0.50 a day.
Oh,
that is competition. The reason for very high prices for the AIDS drugs is not only because of the multinationals trying to make as much money as possible in the initial stages, but also the volumes were very less. And we never knew that one day it will blow out to be this kind of epidemic of involving 3 million people. And also, the AIDS drugs are not just like any other synthetic drugs. There are raw materials which are very expensive. But once the volumes increase and once the breakthroughs in process technology happens, like someone in Hyderabad is saying, who knows? The prices could get to not $1, but maybe 3 years later to 10 cents. And there, when it happens, we don't need the generosity of United Nations or anybody. I think we should move in this direction. Whenever there is a situation like this, the government should be bold enough to say that compulsory licensing is there, and we will allow the generic people to compete, and the volumes become bigger. Just imagine if all the 3 million people receive medicines even at 10 cents a day, what will be the business in South Africa? It will be $3 billion, 10,000 crores, which is the pharmaceutical turnover of India's entire industry.
But as you yourself pointed out, the generics competition is there today. Today, this Hyderabad-based company could say that I will give it at 50 cents a day. But come January 1, 2005, even if a company discovers that they can process, they have a process which can deliver this medicine for 10 cents a day, they will not be able to. Do you think that compulsory licensing by the government is then the only way to ensure that in pandemics like this kind, we should be able to produce?
The industry is actually asking the government, requesting the government to produce, to introduce these provisions, like in Brazil, for example.
Yes.
Brazil has already done it. They said, no, you are not manufacturing that drug here, so we are allowing the generic competition. And Brazil has very efficiently tackled this AIDS situation.
So that will be in emergency cases where
Yes.
public health is involved. But typically, for any ordinary medicine, after January 1, 2005, what will be the way in which competition will really take place?
Actually, let me tell you a secret. That each and every medicine that is discovered is not a major advancement. It is a part improvement of the existing medicines. For example, if you see the ACE inhibitors, it started with captopril, and then Merck came with enalapril, and then somebody came with trandipril, ramipril, etc. So it is not that heavens are going to fall if you don't take ramipril. Now, enalapril is already generic all over the world, and it is as effective. But because of a marginal superiority, you are able to market at that point of time. So I would like to do away with this apprehension that life will come to an end after 2000. It's not true.
Also, sometimes it may even be that the producers are pretending that the product is better, whereas in fact they are only differentiating in order to make their presence
These
felt.
are all marketing gimmicks, and you will have to produce the data, and for every drug that comes into the market, a dozen drugs will fail in the development, so they will have to make up. And in any case, people who can afford in the world, they will pay that for that marginal superiority. Let them pay. But for the poor people, what I would say is enalapril is still there, which is quite good.
There is also this talk by the Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance that they will package the medicine differently, and there was some talk of a public distribution system.
Yeah.
Do you think it's really going to work?
Happily, this proposition is now dropped.
Exactly. Because I think that, in a country where we have not been able to effectively take food grains to the people, who need them, to start this business, maybe this was a way of getting around the price control thing, to put pressure on the government that, you don't do that. But it is dropped now. This is not on the agenda. So you think that after January 1, 2005, the impact of the new intellectual property regime on pricing of medicines would not be very significant?
It will not be that ghastly as people are thinking. Having said that, I would say that if once again, for example, let me think of a scenario where there is a complete cure for AIDS. For some company which has discovered that the cost of manufacture may be $1, but cure for AIDS. So if in his greed for making as much money as possible, if he wants to sell at $100, governments must put their foot down. And I think governments are sovereign governments. They will, in national emergencies, they should put their foot down on companies who want to make money at the expense of poor people.
And the TRIPS agreement actually provides for the government. I think this is the major point, that there is this provision for public health concerns. The governments can do it. I want to ask you, since you made this very successful transition from being a major generic producer to an R&D based producer, what role did government policy play in enabling you to move from the generic production to R&D based?
There is no role. I want the government to be away from me.
No, but when you would did you get any help from the technology development fund?
Nothing. I didn't take 1 rupee from them. Actually, I borrowed from IDBI, and I wanted to return back. They were charging 18% interest. So I wanted to prepay. They didn't take it. I was very offended.
I
So
see.
it's not the government which has done it, but it is the IDBI, a bank, which I said I'm doing for the first time, taking a huge risk. I borrowed 3 months back when I had financial problem. I want to repay it back. I don't want to pay 18% interest. They refuse to prepay.
But how can they do that if you
That's
willing
what.
to?
That is what our. We have no priorities. We have no sense of national pride.
But what about facilitating your R&D? Was there anything in the policies that changed in the 90s? Were you really helped?
In the sense, there were lots of incentives. I must acknowledge that. For example, we could import duty-free the equipment. And
which you could not
reagents.
before 91?
No, because we are recognized. We are a foundation, non-profit foundation. Therefore, we were exempted. That is a government provision.
And when did that happen?
This is there for the last
all
20
along.
years.
I see.
And now the finance minister has given 150% tax benefit on the R&D expenditure. So it has been quite considerate. Government has been quite considerate, and they have even sanctioned 150 crores for drug research.
I see. What would be the best way of using this money?
In my view, we should encourage the small companies to come into the fold, because discovery should not be the purview of only the big companies. A small research scientist may have a great idea. We should encourage him, even if there is 90% chances of failure.
But then there are some who believe that you must give star status to big R&D based companies, and they should get more tax benefits.
I think at one stage we were asking for that. I think now it is no more.
Also been dropped, yeah. But more or less, you think the government policy is going in the right direction to help Indian industry to become more R&D based and compete in the world. Well, that's a very positive note on which to end. Thank you very much, Dr. Reddy. And we will be back same time, same day. Until then, goodbye.